Hello, I'm back and I wanted to say hi. And I recorded yesterday a little blurb on NDEs, reality or fantasy, and touched on some of the things that um, I would consider to be fairly entry level as far as plausibility to the normal person. Um, and I'll cover a few of the points I touched on very briefly in case you haven't looked at that video yet. If not, I kind of, after I got that one done, I thought about it a little bit, and it occurred to me that there's really a lot more depth to the subject than I had given it at the outset. That was kind of introductory, and I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive. My warning or disclaimer would simply be that this is a very trippy subject, and there are things that people have reported back from NDEs in many cases that are very out there in some ways. And yet, once you understand enough of how this all works, begins to make more and more sense. So, what I want to do now is touch on some of these things that are, I would say, I'm doing a part two right now because I want to introduce some of the more trippy things and my foundation for believing that these things actually are reality. So I'm going to do a quick summary of what I covered on the last video just to get those things established as sort of level one. This is my, I mean, I would say it's arbitrary, but it's really not. I'm trying to organize in my own head uh, what my take from watching hundreds of these videos is in terms of what I believe, and I'm building on what has been handed down in terms of past history and recorded things, and all the way up to the present, and watching a lot of recorded YouTube videos. So I'm going to glance at my notebook. I'm just going to review a few of the things. So OBEs are out of body experiences. NDEs are near death experiences, which really are actual death experiences in reality, because these people crossed over to the other side and then came back and told these amazing stories. So in level one, the things that are common to almost all NDEs that people have reported, one of them is encountering just unbelievable love, indescribable feeling of love and acceptance, unconditional love, not based on any religious affiliation or particular past. People from every background, walk of life, atheists, religious people, um, people from every country on the earth report very similar experiences. Usually, the overwhelming love is one of the main things they immediately experience. Very often, there's a light. Sometimes at the end of a tunnel, they don't always go through the tunnel or see the light, but can pop out somewhere else and be in a building or meeting with people. All the communication is telepathic, no words, no languages. It's immediate, it's telepathic, it's direct. So there's no confusion. There's no language or words that could possibly lead to confusion, which is amazing. Um, Most of these experiences involve leaving the body and then seeing things in another plane where they have greatly expanded vision, seeing colors that are not visible on Earth, very vivid. And very often there's a life review where you basically, in a very short period of time, which doesn't exist on the other side, by the way, everything is present moment, including the past and the future. It's all one, which is pretty trippy. Um, so the life review involves going back over their whole life in what could seem like it took weeks or months, but when they are revived on the table, it might have been just a few minutes, which is amazing. They also very often will see relatives that have passed before them, and they'll be waiting for them. They'll meet them. They'll find angels. They'll meet guides, and very often there's a guide that is actually helping this person through life. And then there's a sense of connectedness. We're all one, that the universe is all one, and that people will describe, depending on their background, it could be, they might refer to what we would call God as source or some other creator, some creative force. Ultimately, is identified as love. Love is a creative force that runs throughout the universe, connects everything, And even these people will describe just spending what seems like hours just looking at all the different colors of blades of grass and seeing them almost vibrate or resonate with love energy. So this is all amazing. So that's a quick summary of what I presented in part one. These are pretty common to almost all NDE experiences. Now, jumping into part two, I'm going to lay down a little bit of background, which this is trippy and amazing, but I was just doing a little research, a few minutes ago. I was thinking about this and thinking how far we have come as a race in terms not only of technology, but knowledge and information. And what makes this more plausible to me than ever is, we look back. I was looking at Copernicus, Galileo. These guys are back from the days in the 1500s when early man really thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and their universe consisted of standing on the Earth, maybe looking up in the night sky or looking up at the sun. I mean, there were civilizations that worshiped the sun. That was their source of life and energy. For primitive men, that makes sense, and they look up at night and see stars. They didn't realize stars were other suns for quite a while. Copernicus and Galileo came along and started to create primitive telescopes, began to realize that the Earth wasn't really the center, and that even in our own galaxy, or in our own solar system, the sun is the center. They thought that everything, including the sun, revolved around the Earth. Man was pretty myopic and kind of almost self-centered in his thinking this was it. The Earth was everything, and that everything circulated around the Earth. So we go back from those days in the 1500s, and the church in those days persecuted these guys and basically banned their books, and they were threatened with death. If, in fact, Galileo was basically threatened with death and very harsh censure if he didn't renounce and recant what he'd said. They weren't willing to accept that it wasn't fixed, and their interpretations of their religious scriptures led them to believe that these old ways of thinking were true. Well, we know now. Here we are, thousands of years later, and we had the Hubble telescope reveal the terrific amount. Well, now we have the James Webb telescope, which allows us to see 13.5 billion years into the past in our time, which is incredible, because you're looking at light literally coming from 13.5 billion years ago, basically telling us through that telescope the way things were that far into the past, which is ridiculous. Also, they've calculated now, based on the Webb telescope, there are over potentially 2 trillion galaxies, 2 trillion galaxies in existence, and the stars are estimated at 10 to the 24th power, which is a preposterously large number, considered to be more than the grains of sand on the Earth in terms of just stars. So we have a gigantic universe, and to believe that somehow man is significant or the only life form that exists in this gigantic universe is absurd. So I'm kind of building that up as a basis for accepting the idea that we are not the only people in the entire created world. Jesus himself talked of other sheep and other folds that he has. Many people from coming back from NDEs claim they met Jesus, among others, angels, spiritual powers of various kinds, which, based on the number of testimonies from people of what they saw and what they experienced, I don't doubt this anymore. Another concept that I used to reject, I never had any use for, I never had a basis for believing in, is simply this. Here we are. NDE people come back and basically say that we're forever. There is no death. And passing over to the other side and coming back, they have met people, and there's some really trippy. I'm going to save some of the concepts for the third part of this little series. But one of the concepts I never was really willing to accept was reincarnation. And based on the fact that we're dealing with eternity, I never could quite settle with the idea that we're going to be just resting. I mean, your earthly life could be tough, and when you've done work, you need some rest so you can restore yourself for the next event. But the idea of eternally resting or doing nothing, whiling away eternity, laying in bed or sitting on a beach or any one of these things, I don't know about you, but I'd get bored after a while. So the whole idea that a lot of these people bring back is the idea that this is a learning planet and that we have lives as a way of learning, and there's an eternity of learning, and there's an infinite amount of wisdom and knowledge to be experienced. And the things that we like doing on the earth are a lot of the ideas we have, things on the earth, are basically given to men and women and people by these ideas mimic what's actually on the other side in a lot of ways. And a lot of the activities that we enjoy here, we can do there. We just are free of the body, which is actually a greatly limiting entity. These bodies are a temporary vessel that we are in for a time. And then when we're not with them, people report seeing in 360 degrees around them, hearing and seeing things without obstruction, passing through walls, buildings, traveling at enormous speeds, things that the body would not permit to have happen. So a lot of these things were considered to be spirit, energy, vibration. Everything on the other side is described as forms of energy. So that's pretty trippy. Light, energy, vibration, things like this. These are some of the words that I've picked up. The whole we talk about having a vibe. It's kind of a real thing. So another thing that we can potentially see here is people actually plan ahead. This is trippy. They plan ahead what they're going to learn in the next life. So they'll sit down with their guide or various councils of I would say, angelic beings or other beings that help people plan out what they want to do. So a lot of times people will say, well, they found out that they planned ahead what they were going to do on this earth, what lessons they were going to learn. And this is a free will planet. It's considered free will because people are permitted to make decisions. We aren't told what to do. A lot of people, including myself, had this concept of God as somebody that wanted to micromanage you and tell you what to do and da 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 da. And Jesus himself quoted scriptures, in fact, Psalms, saying outright that we are gods. And essentially, we're gods in the making. We have enormous amount of freedom, power that we don't know we have. And we can plan ahead how we're going to approach the next life. We have a lot of power in this life that we don't necessarily avail ourselves of because of our lack of development in this area. Another thing people encounter when they go over to the other side is a lot of them refer to it as information downloads. There's an enormous amount of information that can be imparted immediately. And people will say they encountered people and suddenly knew their whole past life, knew tons of things about them they didn't ever expect to know. And, vast amounts of information are available immediately. And when a lot of these people come back and have gained powers they didn't know they would have that kind of linger with them, including like meeting somebody and knowing a whole lot about them, things they would never have been able to learn. But yet the idea being we're all connected. We don't really realize that or accept that, a lot of us. I mean, I've accepted that as truth now because I realize we are all connected. And God, the way people describe God is simply this love force that we're all part of. That even the plants and the trees and pets and everything are all part of this life force. People see pets and plants and trees and everything on the other side as well. So we're all connected. And another thing I was going to say that I said on the last video was simply during the life review, people relive their whole life and get to experience it as the people that they affected with their life. So all of a sudden you're seeing your impact on other people's lives, and it gives you an opportunity to make changes in your own mind as far as how you're going to approach the future. Like the golden rule is really literally God's request, or I want to say requirement. It's the best thing we can possibly do. It's the highest and best way to live because ultimately we reap what we've sown. There's a lot of these things. I mean, I grew up in churches and I do know the Bible pretty well, and I see how much of it is actually true. And I mean, there's truth in most religions that aren't devoted to darkness in itself. And people have picked up on a lot of these things over time. And, since history was recorded, people had experiences like this, but this has not been widely received until or at least to me until now. I recently, the last couple of years, saw some pretty neat videos and documentaries of people that had come back from having passed over to the other side. Dr. Ray Moody wrote a book that I actually read back in 1975, I think. And it fascinated me at the time, but it didn't really get integrated. I didn't really assimilate it as this is truth. It was more like, that's fascinating, that's interesting, but it was trippy and not something I really had grasped. For some reason now at my age of 65, years and years and years, decades of seeking, finally something popped and I'm like, you know what? I think this is actually the reality that we've all been looking for. Nothing quite set right with me until I started researching this. So I'm going to touch on a couple more points here. So one thing that does happen too is that, and I use the word God. Some people would say source or creator or whatever, but a lot of people have come back or when they've gone over to the other side, seen buildings, people, angels, different things that fit the context of their life and their past. So not everybody experiences the same thing or sees the same thing. People they'll have an experience that's almost been custom prepared for them to experience based on what they'll understand. So it's good, there's an accommodation made. So not everybody sees the same type of buildings, the same things. People see different things. And some people have actually seen like other planets, other worlds, other universes, traveled out in space and things like that. Not too many, not a lot of those, but some. There's also interesting things that happen because people, we've all gone through various experiences, especially people that have been injured and come back from that. They gain powers of healing and other things like that. So when they come back, very often they have gifts they received by way of going to the other side, and they've been healed physically. They see healing taking place in their damaged body that allows them to return to it and live if their time has not yet come. So there is a lot there. I hope you found that all interesting, and I am going to work on a part 3 that gets more into depth on some of the trippier subjects that I didn't want to delve into on this one, but I really hope you found this interesting. And I encourage you, there's a lot of good videos on YouTube you can watch. I would stay with ones that are basically people telling their own story in their own words, a video where you're seeing their face, as opposed, some of them are, kind of sound a little bit AI generated or a little bit translated. I don't trust those as much. I kind of sense when I'm listening to something that sounds authentic. So if you look on YouTube for NDEs, stick with things where it's real people telling their real story, plausible people like yourself. And I find those to be the most convincing. So I'm going to let you go. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you on the next video. And I do hope to bring in some people to interview soon so I can discuss this subject with them. But for now, I'm just putting out what I'm learning as I go along. So you're welcome to travel along on this journey with me. Thanks, and take care.